Communication in 2018, where she is currently serving as the director. So how are you doing tonight, Jenny?
I'm really good. I took a nap today because my daughter woke up at 4 for a while. So there may be a few noises, dogs barking, cats roaming, things like that, just so everyone knows.
As it goes, as is working and you know, sticking with the theme, innovating in the time of COVID. That's amazing.
My cats are definitely innovators.
So with that, I would love to welcome our second panelist tonight, Brianna Lynn Hernández Baurichter. Oh, Jenny, you can stay on too, love.
Hi.
Hey. So Brianna Lynn Hernández Baurichter is a Chicana artist, curator, educator, guided by socially engaged practices. Her background includes experience working in community organizations, galleries, museums, higher education settings, and as a consultant with public health researchers. In developing as an artist and creative professional, Brianna credits her late mother, Sylvia D. Hernandez, as her most significant mentor and inspiration for her creativity, resilience, and compassion she demonstrated throughout her life. Brianna's creative practice and worldview is also influenced by her mixed heritage from Mexican and German parents, embodying the spirit of a hybrid, eager to form connections and build new realities. In the studio, Brianna creates installation through several mediums, including large-scale charcoal drawings, video art, sculpture, performances, each incorporating a high level of physicality and movement to reveal knowledge held within the body. Brianna's current body of work focuses on the experience of providing end-of-life care and subsequent grieving process. In addition to formal artworks, this body of work offers workshops and takeaway resources for viewers to self-educate through the safety of the creative process. As a curator, Brianna works with artists to make socially charged topics publicly accessible in order to create opportunities for education and empathy. This focus on empathy building is also embedded into her education philosophy, whether in the classroom, workshops, or as a consultant, enabling deeper connections to the purpose and potential of the content. As an extension of this socially conscious approach, Brianna frequently collaborates with community health researchers to incorporate the arts into collection and dissemination of public health public data. Brianna is currently the Director of Cultural Transformation at the Milwaukee Artist Resource Institute, or Network, where she is developing policy and community engagement initiatives to address equity and inclusion in the greater Milwaukee area arts community. So Brianna, how are you tonight?
I'm good. I'm so excited to be here and to hear about everybody else's work and just learn a little bit. I have a similar dog disclaimer. There might be some barking, but hopefully it won't get too loud.
That's amazing. And we should also share, you're so modest and wonderful in your bio here. You won an art prize, did you not?
Oh no, I was nominated for the time-based category a few years ago, but no official award selection.
Still amazing nonetheless. You're wonderful. So glad you're here. You're so wonderful. So I would love to welcome, last but not least, Eirann, our third panelist. Hello. So Eirann Betka-Pope is a producer, artist, and activist based in Grand Rapids. They are the former owner of the Fusebox and teaches with both the Grand Rapids Civic Theater and the Comedy Project. Eirann is the founder and president of Funny Girls and was a founder and former producer, writer of Comedy Outlet Mondays, as well as a founder and executive committee member of the Grand Rapids Improv Festival. Eirann and their wife, Jenna, founded Betka-Pope Productions in 2020 and have produced projects such as GR Crime Tours, The Grand Race, and other performances and events. Eirann enjoys traveling, repurposing materials and objects, and puns, which I am a complete fan of. How are you tonight, Eirann?
I'm fantastic, and I'm so happy and honored to be among such incredible artists and to learn so much about what you do as well.
Yes, I love it. And do you have also a pet disclaimer?
I do. My pet, my dog Cornelius is also a very vocal participant in the community, and my wife is trying to keep him at bay too. So we're all in the same dog boat.
Well, I'm so excited that we're all here. We're all here together in the space that we can in these insane COVID times, honoring this year, this week, together in the way that we can. So it's such a gift and blessing to be here together, and to hear about how you have all navigated this incredible world historic time. So with that, we will start with Jenny, and move forward, and Brianna will go next, and then Eirann, and then we'll do some Q&A questions at the end. So for wonderful participants and attendees, if you have any questions about the work, the process, how they've been going, how they've been doing, what they've been doing, questions about anything, feel free to write in the Q&A. And if you have tech questions, feel free to write in the chat. So we're excited to start with Jenny right now.
So can I go ahead and share my screen?
Absolutely.
As I said, I have cats that may interrupt. I've also got a cat that is eating right now. So if you hear any weird noises, it's probably a cat eating. Okay, let's actually put this in presenter view. Hi to everyone who doesn't know me. I'm Jenny Bastian. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm going to talk about a couple of different things. Well, a lot of different things. I'm going to talk about my own art practice first, and then I'm going to talk about the business that I co-founded and I'm a collective member and co-run after that. And they're kind of interwoven, so there might be some things that that sort of I go back and forth. And in terms of how I present artwork or my own experiences and talk about my job as well, like I kind of talk in circles a little bit. So I probably won't be checking the chat, but I'm happy to answer questions later if anything feels unclear to anyone. I'm Mallory. If it gets to about 10 minutes and I haven't gotten to the next, the business part, feel free to flag me. I don't mind being interrupted.
Absolutely.
I just put my name up here with some pretty fabric. So one thing you should know about me is that I really like fabric. Okay, so I wanted to start not with like pictures of artwork, but a list of some things that I think about a lot. I was, as I said earlier, taking a nap today because I woke up at 4 a.m. and I was thinking about what it is that what are the actions and processes that I like to use when I am either making art or just living my life. I've been taking photos since I was probably 13, and I still do all the time. I use a film camera. I have several film cameras, and I use digital, and I use my phone. And it's sort of a mental processing of life for me. There are a lot of, there's a cat scratching glass right now. I also like to ask questions of myself. I think that I have a couple of friends from undergrad that are on this call that have definitely received some emails from me over the past 20 years where I've asked a short survey of questions about emotional experience. And I have found it really helpful over my entire adult life to ask other people questions in order to pull myself out of my own head, out of my own difficult times to get perspective. And I still find that a really useful process. A lot of my artwork and my professional work is about making space for vulnerability, whether it's space, physical space or emotional space or space like this. And then listening in those spaces and reflecting back what I'm hearing, and then thinking about problem solving. Okay, if what I'm hearing is someone's having an issue that maybe there are resources for, or maybe there are ways of solving that can happen just by listening or connecting people to each other. Those are great interests of mine as well. And then paying attention to coincidence is something that I've thought about a lot over the past 15 to 20 years. And I still don't exactly know how it connects to all of the things that I am working on. But what I mean when I say paying attention to coincidence is like when one example is I bought a dress at a thrift store maybe 10, 15 years ago. Then 5 years later, a friend sent me the exact same dress that they found at a thrift store in a different size. They didn't know I had this other dress. They saw this dress, they thought of me. And it's sort of it's a coincidence, or it's serendipity. Or I noticed myself finding clothing at thrift stores, to continue the thrift store trend, that was all from the same brand of a couple of items of clothing that my grandmother had. So thinking about how things connect to each other, threads that come through our lives, and sometimes there's some sort of record that I might make of that, and sometimes there's not, but it's something that I'm thinking about a lot. So now I'll get to showing you some work. I have a lot of photos, and I have struggled a lot to understand how to edit them. I'm not an editor for myself. I'm like not good at it. And I thought that was a really big flaw when I was in undergrad and in grad school. And then only really in the past 5 or so years have I realized like I don't need to be an editor. I don't need to be making big exhibitions of framed photos. I can just choose a topic, and then I could maybe make a book about it, or a zine, or some prints. And so the theme that has come up a lot in the past few years is pairs. I see pairs of things. And I started noticing that there were lots of pairs. I probably have about 200 analog film photos of pairs of things that are similar to what you're seeing on the screen here. Things at flea markets, things that people are holding, things that end up on a table, my own shoes. And sometimes they're just mundane, and sometimes they're a little eerie. Sometimes they're pretty. And that connects with that sort of idea of like serendipity and circling back on things, and just coincidence, and sort of finding connections. And that's sort of an ongoing thing that I have done for a long time, finding these pairs in photos. Here's an example of an exhibition that I had that combined both photographs and textile installation. I really love old bed sheets. I like to sew them together and cover walls and things with them. This is at Arts and Literature Laboratory in Madison. It was a really great space for this. I basically made it not look like a gallery space. And that was my way of reconciling, how do I make a space that is this white cube? How do I make it something that it's not? A place where people don't think about whether they're, the red wine they're drinking is staining their teeth, or they have the nice heels on, but like make it a space that is comfortable for people and that they can enjoy and feel nostalgia and vulnerability. This is a lot of photos to look at once. This is 2 projects that are connected. I did a residency at the Madison Public Library's Bubbler program. They have their own space. The Bubbler is like a maker space that also has artist residencies, does arts programs with the public schools, they have connections and a Making Justice program with the Juvenile Detention Center and the Youth Shelter. They're really committed to connecting artists to community in a really beautiful way. And I did a residency there. So I covered, as you can see in this bottom right photo, I made it, again, not look like a conference room or a library space. I tried to make it look like someone's weird house. And then I had tea available, people could hang out. I also did a project with their community engagement librarians where I documented intergenerational relationships and friendships and families. And that then we gave prints to the people that were involved, and then made these huge banners, which you can see just at the bottom here, that were inside the entrance to the library, so people could see the celebration of connection across generations. This was a tent, just a really pretty tent at a food and art festival. And it was simply a space on a really, really hot day where people could come sit inside and they could, is that my 10 minutes? Thank you. Almost.
You're good. You're good.
I can really talk if you let me. So
no, it's brilliant. I love it. I'm here for it.
My husband helped me with this project, even though he had ruptured his Achilles tendon and had a boot on. We were at the top of a hill, but he helped me make this lemonade, and we served like, I don't know, something like 3 or 4 gallons of this concentrated, lemonade with water to people that would trudge up this hill. It's just a cozy spot. This was a recent project. I don't have any photographs of people interacting with it because of COVID, but this project was really pretty helpful for me to do at this time. A friend of mine collaborated with me on it, Luisa Fernando Garcia Gomez, who is from Colombia and lives in Miami now, but lived in Madison for quite a while. We did this work about home, like what is a home? What does it represent physically? What makes you feel good about being in your home? So we did a survey, and at the bottom left, you can see this little pile. There's a pile of zines. And we did a survey and we recorded the answers in that zine. So people were able to take that. We had a grant from the Madison Arts Commission, so we were able to make that free. And these houses, I'll try to make it a short explanation. We made our own fabric designs. We combined some of our own designs where I scanned fabric, blew it up, changed it a little. Luisa, you can see the sort of tropical one here. She made hers completely from, drawing digitally. And then we had fabric printed, and then we combined that with vintage bed sheets and made these slip covers over air mattresses. And we constructed these very fragile yet massive homes. I've got 2 more slides about my personal work, so I'll run through those really fast. Since I had my daughter 2 years ago, it's been a lot harder for me to do large scale works. I also had a fibromyalgia diagnosis, which for some people it's debilitating and some people it is not. For me, it can be pretty debilitating. And so I've had to learn how to have better boundaries around my job, around the work I want to make, and then what can I make that can sit on my lap? What can I make while I'm sitting watching TV at night? And so I've been using old pieces of napkins and bed sheets and things and making these small, soft sculptures. And then I am also doing this thing where I'm painting on clothing with fabric dye, and I'm painting things that my daughter asks me to draw, or things that remind me of wallpaper or words that my daughter says, and things that I liked to draw in middle school. So I'm kind of all over the place with my own stuff right now. And I'm just trying to get stuff in when I can, because I do a lot of work at my job. So this is communication. As Mallory said, it is a DIY arts and music space. We're a sober all ages venue. We have this beautiful mosaic that some artists created for us. It's a really beautiful space. It will have been closed to the public for a year on Saturday, which is basically 3 years after we got our lease. So that means we've been open for 2 years and closed for 1 year, but we're still alive. And I'm really proud of that. And I know that there's at least one person on this call. Well, Mallory used to volunteer at communication when she lived in Madison. And then I know Sarah Meredith is on this call, and we've had a great team that has evolved. I think I'm the only founding member left, but we have other collective members that have come into play and really put in a lot of work. So you can see our house rules. It's important to us that not only are we a sober space, we are a safer space. We're focused on equity. We're focused on youth. We're volunteer run, so none of us takes a paycheck. However, we are very committed to paying our artists and performers as equitably as anything allows, but we basically won't do a program if we don't have the funding to pay someone. We do a lot of live performance in pre-COVID times. The stage mostly looks like it does on the right here, pretty empty. We're a small space, our capacity is about 50. So it doesn't make sense for us to do a lot of live streams or try to fit people into the space that wouldn't actually pay enough ticket-wise for the performers. We do a lot of youth arts education. We've done a teens art program pretty consistently the first 2 years. We've obviously not been able to do that as much as we had a bit before. We have done some virtual learning. We've done these community solidarity kits, which were kits where people could make art in their homes. We also were able to pay artists to create some of these items to send to people that then they could sort of color in or put on their yard so that they could invite their neighbors sort of in conceptually, even though they couldn't have them in their homes. Here's just some exhibition documentation. The same room where we have live music is exhibition space as well. And I could really talk a lot more about all these things, but I'm gonna try to keep it nice and short and sweet. We did do our teens program last summer. We were able to do most of it virtually, and we had 2 days of paper making in person because our COVID numbers were very low in Dane County. And it was a pretty magical time to have 2 days where we had youth in our parking lot hanging out and making stuff. And these were the artists on the left that worked with us. One of the other ways that we have tried to bridge the gap between not only COVID, but thinking about how artists are creatively respond to societal issues. We did these art auctions for criminalized survivors. And when I say criminalized survivors, for anyone who isn't familiar, generally those are people who are survivors of sexual violence who have then either killed their attacker, trafficker, rapist, or have gotten in trouble for something that happened while they were a victim of something. So we were able to pay artists as well as raise money for survivors by auctioning this artwork on our Instagram account. And it was actually very successful. It was a lot of work, but it was really, really worth it. And we did this with an artist in Milwaukee, Linnea Sproles, and then Kayla Coe, who is also in Milwaukee, part of Black and Pink. We also have an online shop. We pivoted to moving all of our brick and mortar artists onto our website. First, we did virtual markets on Instagram. And then we decided we've got to get this on our website. And that was a really big undertaking to get. We now have, I think, about 50 artists in our shop, and almost everyone has stuff online. We went from, selling literally nothing online for months and months and months, or nothing in general, to, I believe our total last year was over $6,000 that we paid out to artists, not including the cut that we take as a business. And that is, for a small business, that's a really big number. That felt really positive. We also have a program called Justice Club, which is a social justice focused art workshop series. And they create zines with youth and families, and they read a book, talk about a social justice issue, and then they make art about it. We're actually doing a camp. Hopefully, we're waiting on a grant, but I'm pretty sure we're going to do this camp where teens will be able to create their own publication, a workbook about individual identities and collective movement building. And we will be able to print those for them because we now have risograph machines, which are like really nice color copiers, basically. It's a little more complicated, but I don't have time to explain it probably. And then another big thing is that we've been trying to support musicians, because we can sell artwork online, we can do a lot of things virtually, but unless we can figure out a really, labor-free way to do a live stream, which isn't possible, it's really difficult to support musicians. So we've started doing these Queer Madison mixtapes, and that allows musicians to connect and try to be a part of a community still. And then we they did like lo-fi recordings on their phones, on their computers. And then we took those, up to the levels a little bit. Not me, I'm not a music, I'm not an audio editing person. And then we put it on Bandcamp, and donations from that were given to Freedom Inc., which is a Black and Southeast Asian focused activist nonprofit doing really great work in our community. We also put a call out for imaginary tour posters, which we will then print, thinking about where would musicians like to have been in the past year. I believe this is my last slide. So I was referring to these risograph machines. We're now starting to publish, which is really exciting. One of the things that I wish we had more time to talk about, and maybe if anyone has questions about it, we can. Nonprofits have a really terrible system. Like, the way that you're supposed to fund a nonprofit is by writing grants nonstop. And yet the grants don't cover administrative overhead, or most of them don't cover capital costs or investing in the business or buying a building. So how is a nonprofit actually supposed to survive if you don't want volunteer labor forever? The goal is not for me to be a volunteer director forever and have a white woman in leadership forever. The goal is to have a paid position someday. So how are we going to get there? And the way that we are trying to do this now, and the way that we have tried to figure out, okay, what is the pandemic forcing us to do? It's forcing us to consider, what are the revenue streams that are sustainable for us? How do we project a budget that's actually going to work? How do we focus maybe on one grant and have one program, not try to do 30 different classes, because we just don't have the bandwidth. But publishing is going to help us to get to this point. So I feel very hopeful. I feel exhausted, but I feel so grateful for our community, and I'm really excited moving forward. So I will stop there, because I'm sure I'm hitting 20 minutes.
You got 5 minutes, love?
Oh my God,
Yeah.
really? Great.
You're brilliant.
I'm not done there. So, okay. I'm going to talk a little more about Justice Club. Oh, I'm so excited. Great. So yeah. Justice Club was started by two artists, Grace Olson and Araceli Zuniga. I don't know if either of them are on this call, but I love them both a lot. I am so grateful. So the thing that is the most wonderful about what I get to do at Communication as a job is that I had no idea that I would get to become and exercise my skills as a mentor and an advocate. So I get to advocate for artists and for musicians and other creative people by demanding better pay, by setting an example of paying artists equitably and paying performers equitably. I've gotten to know now people who are making policy, people who work in the Arts Commission and our one arts administrator. By the way, for anyone not in Wisconsin, Wisconsin is 50th in the nation for arts funding. So we've obviously got a lot of work to do when it comes to policy. So one of the best things that I have gotten to do is learn how to be a mentor. And I feel really grateful to artists like Grace and Araceli, who are fairly young and really trying to get into community. And they had such a wonderful idea. It was like a privilege that I got to sort of shepherd it into the world. And so their program with Justice Club has become something that's, I think, a lot bigger than they thought it would be. We are now partnering with Briar Patch Youth Services, which is an organization that has been around a long time in Madison, works with at-risk youth. And when I say at-risk youth, it means youth who are experiencing homelessness, have run away, are at risk because they aren't receiving support for various identities that they hold, or perceived threats, things like that. And they have a built-in audience of all of these young people who are really excited to, you know, do things at their space. So we're going to their space. We're going to bring materials, and they're going to work on making a workbook about this identity, individual identity, and collective movement building. So that's one example of how exciting the work that we're doing is, and one way that we are looking to not only help artists, pay artists, but also like strengthen networks within our community and help build a more sustainable system for creative people. Have I hit my limit now?
You have about a minute left. You're brilliant.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know
But be sure, Darlene, the chat is like blowing up, and it's sharing how or if people can get involved, especially and we'll do a more formal Q&A at the end.
Yeah.
So just to remind attendees, you know, to share questions throughout, and we will share, you know, questions to all of the panelists at the end. But one of the questions I know people will have is, do you collaborate with other cities? And how can artists get involved in this process? Because what you're doing is clearly incredible and inspiring, and people want more of it. So learning more about that.
So nice to hear. One thing that's really nice, I did a local talk last week, and I talked to a university class the other night, and it's just so nice to be having the perspective of looking at what we've done in the past year. And this isn't even half of it, you know, and thinking about how other people are seeing it feels really nice. So thank you for sharing that. We have not worked with other cities, but I would love to. Especially with our publishing, I'm really interested in collaborating with people. With other artists, definitely. I mean, I'm always, people can just like email me. Here, I'll put my email up. I have it right there. Email me. I am thrilled to get emails that are about collaboration. I will meet with you on Zoom if I've never met you before. That's fine. You'll probably see my cats again, maybe my daughter. The one thing I'll say is, like, because we are literally 6 or 7 people, everything we do is slow and intentional, and it has to be. And that's the only reason we've made it through this year. But please contact me. I would love that.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Mallory.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad you're doing what you're doing. It is so valuable and important. And just having worked with you and known you for so many years, for those of you in Grand Rapids, I very recently, over the summer, moved to Grand Rapids, having lived in Madison, Wisconsin for 12 years. So I'm very blessed to be with Lions and Rabbits now as their studio arts program manager. But I have this deep connection and relationship to other cities as well. So to be able to bring in, you know, artists and community organizers like Jenny, or artists like Brianna, and you know, to have Eirann here is such an incredible gift, to kind of have this regional approach to things. So thank you so much, and I think it strengthens all of us. So thank you so much, Jenny, and we will come back to you for questions at the end, dear. Yes. So next will be Brianna. Hey, love.
Hey.
Hey. So we did, it was so good to see you. And I have known you for several years now, having met you in Madison, but now you're in Milwaukee, and yeah, working at Marn, which is incredible.
Yeah, I'm so excited. It's a very new role for me. So like, as in, I just recently started, so I'm trying to, you know, get my bearings, but I'm really looking forward to all the potential ahead. And
that's amazing.
Yeah, I'm gonna just see if I can figure out how to share my screen here. All right, can you see this?
Yep.
Okay, great. So
Thanks,
hi
Jen.
again, everybody. What was that?
Can you make it full screen there, love?
Yeah. You good?
Yep, we're
Coming
good.
through?
It's brilliant.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hi again, everybody. My name is Brianna. My pronouns are she, her, and Aya. I'm really excited to be here with all of you tonight. Thank you, Jenny, for a great presentation. It was so nice to hear more about all of the wonderful work you're doing. I know we were talking about what has this past year been like, and how have we been surviving and thriving and trying to make new ways of being through all of this. But I wanted to start with some of the work I've been doing the past few years leading up to it, which is a video performance installation series called Anticipatory Después. And this title comes from both the anticipatory grief of providing end-of-life care, después referencing the aftermath of once the patient passes away, and all of the messy, complicated places where those things overlap. So this is a screenshot from one of the videos, and essentially what each of these pieces tries to do is communicate some of the physical, emotional, psychological experiences of the person providing care, of the person who is receiving care, and how all of that can twist together to form entirely new circumstances and relationships. Oftentimes when I'm working on these videos, there's a lot of physicality involved in them because it's trying to embody those different emotions that are coming up that are not always tangible or don't always represent well through language. And then once the video is recorded, taking things from the video and placing it into a sort of vignette to give a sense of the space where maybe that experience happened in, trying to immerse the viewer in the scenario, give a closer, more intimate idea of what it might be like to be there. And so I've been, over the past couple of years, since my mother passed away and having provided that care for her, trying to recreate these moments, both for my own healing, as well as connecting with others who've been through those experiences. And even more in that extension is, how does that help other people outside of the experience have a little bit more empathy for maybe someone in their life who is going through that. So this is another example of one of those vignettes that's created, where the video itself is in this small little place on top of this dresser. Some of the items that are featured are placed together within the space. Another example of that is then deconstructing it a little bit further, trying to create a different kind of immersion where this video was spliced into several different just little stills in order to give the viewer a sense of control over how they're moving through it with this viewfinder. So this little bit of a summary is mainly just to convey where things have been, exploring my own grief, exploring my own trauma related to caregiving, and how to communicate that with others, connect with others, and provide, as some of the things in my bio mentioned, how does that turn into workshops or takeaway resources that people can then, once they've had the experience with the work, maybe some emotions are brought up, they can then go and take that into further education with these resources instead of having nowhere to land. And so a lot of these initial videos, I think, were more heavily focused on the acute grief for me and all the complicated ways it was intertwined with the trauma of caregiving. But I wanted to shift my focus a little bit to look more specifically at the caregiving experience. So at the beginning of last year, I started a residency at the Santa Fe Art Institute. Is a thematic residency. So every year they have a different theme, and last year's theme was labor. So I went in with the intention of looking at the labor of family caregivers. And of course, caregiving has a lot of different definitions, but my perspective, providing medical end-of-life care, is where I was coming into it from. So this was the very beginning of March. I showed up really excited to be working in this space, this beautiful scenery and resources and studio space. And very, very quickly, things took a turn. About like a week and a half in, they pulled us all around this big table and said, so we're having the staff work from home. If you have to stay, that's all right. Just please don't go anywhere. But essentially people started leaving every other night. We were joking, it was like we were on Survivor because we're all in this giant big shared house and every night somebody new was leaving. So I definitely was still focused on the caregiving work, but I had a very different experience of what that meant. Instead of this collaborative nature with everybody doing their own thing, but also, you know, seeing what each other was doing, it was a very small group and a lot of time for reflection. So I started poking around some resources, looking into what I had brought with me, what was there, and how that might change how I was approaching the work. I started experimenting with some materials of how could I make casts or replicas of some common caregiver tools, and what would it look like if they were treated in a way that made them elevate to this sacred status. So here's some examples of some resin pieces, some poorly applied copper leaf, just experimenting, trying to pull it all together. And here's a little bit of what that turned into. I started playing with light, playing with shadow, playing with reflection, applying silver, gold, how can illuminating something change the way that these tools are looked at? Because oftentimes when you're caregiving, everything is stressful and everything feels like this awful, unfair experience. And again, speaking to caring for the terminally ill, because there's not just the task at hand, it's also what it means and what it means for it to be suddenly over. And so I wanted to think about what are some ways that caregivers can empower themselves to deal with these stressful moments. I know for me, that meant reframing how I looked at the tools that I was given. Instead of this, you know, cheap plastic that I was going to throw away and that I didn't even want to have to deal with, it was, what if this really were treated as a holy object, and how would that reflect back on me and my role in this? How the work that I'm doing is sacred, and maybe it doesn't erase the pain of the situation, but I can approach each moment, however stressful, with a bit more control and peace over what's happening. So this little action shot in studio space, one of the benefits of everybody leaving right away was that a lot of space opened up, where the few of us who did stick around started kind of going a little bit wild in the gallery space. So I started, you know, laying things out. What would it look like for all of this to come together in an altar fashion? So the kind of resulting initial series is Útiles Curativos, and essentially it means healing tools, because again, it's not just a piece of medical equipment, and it's not something that's necessarily going to fix an illness or solve all the problems, but it can be approached in a healing way. So I was really excited to have the space to work with. It was a very quiet space because there was not a lot of people there. So I got a chance to explore what this meant. And this was at the very beginning of the pandemic. So I kind of came into this approach to caregiver tools, not with the perspective of what caregivers now would be facing, but with what I had faced. And so that was a very, very different perspective, but there was already starting to be overlap with some of the news reports that were coming through. So I kind of landed there with the initial start of this series. And then I had to go home. And by the time I left, because I didn't rush out of there, nobody was flying anymore. So this was the line in TSA. There was no line. There were like 5 other people on my flight. It was pretty surreal. And when I came back, I realized that it wouldn't be safe for me to find a shared studio space. I couldn't really use my home in a way that was conducive to the work that I had been making. So I wanted to switch it up. I was thinking about other things in this grief, death, caregiving work and how it could be reimagined. And so I started working with some more natural materials out in the yard because it was nice outside and I didn't have a studio. So I was just trying to improvise. And I'm playing with these plants and seeing what they do and how they react to each other, to the soil, and to, you know, application materials that might, you know, bend their behavior a little bit. and started sculpting them together in different forms. I was testing out, how can I wrap them together? I had to cover a few of them at night because we got random bouts of frost that came out of nowhere. So this middle one is covered up. But essentially what this turned into was an alternative to a conventional cemetery. So this piece, which I'm really grateful I got to show at Walker's Point Center for the Arts for Dia de Muertos, is Aquí Descansamos, and essentially is taking common tombstone shapes and crafting them out of soil and flowers and grasses in order to reimagine what does it look like to memorialize someone. While there are traditions across the globe for why cemeteries look the way they do, there's often a disconnect of why they are the way they are and whether or not that's something that people really want. There's kind of an aura of somber, energy around these gray stone cemeteries that most of us visualize when we think of one. And it's not that losing someone isn't sad, but it's just, I think it's interesting when you contrast it to with something where there's more vibrancy. Like, so the cemetery where my abuelos are buried is full of flowers and painted tombstones, and everything is very colorful and celebrating, those who have passed on. So I wanted to bring some of that into the energy of this, as well as acknowledge how the plants themselves demonstrate a little bit of what grief is like in the way that they change in the environment, and especially over time. There's not this one consistent look. There's things that come up, things bloom, things fade, they decompose, they recombine with the soil, and maybe they come back in some spots, but maybe they don't. And just allowing it to be however it is. And so a couple more details from that are just looking at what are the different shapes of common tombstones and how can they be reimagined in a more energetic and lively way to show that life is this very cyclical process. It's not just one stagnant, you're either alive or you're dead. How do those things come together, and how can we imagine that world where we're eventually together with those who have passed, because we have also passed on. And so as soon as the show was over, I took it back to the yard and started to see more of what this would look like as it changed over time. So on the left is kind of like still fall, but maybe some of them have started to dry out a little bit. And on the right, it was the first time that it had rained and then the water started to freeze. So there's some little crackling in there. So this was back in the fall, and then it started snowing. So I was starting to document over the course of the winter, and I know we had a few really large snowfalls, and it has just started to melt. So I'm not exactly sure what they look like right now, but I started to see the tops of these little reeds here coming through. So we'll see very soon. But essentially, this was the first prototype of what this could look like reimagined, and also what it might look like in more public spaces. So hopefully this will be, something that's continued and built out even larger in a more public space, hopefully outdoors at some point in time. So in addition to reimagining my work in the context like outside of a studio and in the yard and changing over time, also looking at how can I connect with folks when we can't connect in person. And I'm very grateful to be a participant in this project called the Artist Grief Deck. It's run by the Artist Literacy Institute and an amazing team of organizations that have come together to make this happen in a way that supports artists and supports people who either have been grieving, since pre-COVID, or have just found themselves in grief and are now more isolated than ever before. And so this is essentially a toolkit that they can use either within their bubble or on their own, that combines visuals from artists as well as prompts. And some of those prompts, like the one here, this is a prompt that I wrote for my card, this is a still from one of the videos that I've made. But some of the prompts are from poets, and some of them are from educators and writers who have just responded to a prompt about what does it mean for perspective to change over time? What does it mean for supporting a child in grief? and how all those different layers come together. So in addition to the actual physical deck, which is really beautiful and amazingly crafted, I'm so proud to be a part of it, is also the artist Grief Deck website. So it's griefdeck.com. And each of these cards you can flip over and read more about the artwork, about the prompt, you know, the artist who made it, and how that can be a resource for you and yours. And what's really beautiful about it is that because there's so many different artists and so many different prompt writers, there's something for everybody. So because nobody grieves the same way, and because we're all at different stages in our journey, there's really no one fixed way to look at it. It's not one company that decided these are the things that we're going to say. It's all these different perspectives coming together. So that's been a really beautiful experience to be part of. And then right now, I actually am very fortunate to have found a new studio space that I can safely go to, because there is a door that I could close and make sure that there's no shared air at the moment. So as I mentioned earlier, with the initial care work that I started in Santa Fe, at the time I came into it, again, thinking about my perspective as a caregiver pre-COVID. So a lot of the trauma, a lot of the isolation, a lot of the struggles and stressors were from a time when, even though I didn't have a lot of support, I could still, you know, go somewhere and grab a coffee, or I could have maybe a friend over for a few minutes to talk about what was going on occasionally. But now how caregivers don't have that. So it's even more isolating. So I've been revisiting these care tools, not only the ones that I've made, but new ones that I've gathered, and how can the tools themselves, but also the way that they're put together in different mediums and different virtual accessibility continue to provide some sort of mental support and reprieve for those who are still in it, because there's not a clear end in sight for a lot of this, and there's going to be a lot of aftermath in terms of that trauma. And so thinking about how can I continue that work from my perspective and add in the past year's experience. And the other half of that is the embodiment that I do with the other videos, and how I can step more into the experience of my mother, which I've done a little bit in the past, but I wanted to, again, based off of this past year, reflect more on what it would be to be in that position now, and knowing that, again, there's this compounded isolation, this compounded stress. And so embodying her, embodying the experience of being in those very vulnerable situations where you're relying on somebody else, and having more space away from the moment of her death has kind of given me a little bit more courage to think about what she might have been going through without, you know, kind of spiraling into those feelings. So that's kind of where I'm at now, and thinking about what that could look like for the near future. But it's a little bit TBD, just experimenting and exploring and seeing how it all comes together. But one other part of the practice in all of this is, again, connecting with other people. So on my website, I have resources listed. So if somebody sees my show, they can immediately have something to go to, whether that's a list of caregiver resources or grief resources, and also a place to share their story, because a lot of times that's just really all people want. They want to be heard and to know that everything that they're going through is being witnessed by someone. And so offering the chance to do that in a way that can be incorporated into future works. And maybe that's not a direct one-to-one, but maybe somebody describes an emotion that they were going through, or a little moment that happened, and how can that take the work from a place of my personal expression into these more shared communal experiences. You know, grief itself, the fact that we will all lose someone, the fact that we will all eventually die is pretty universal, but there's also differences in the way that we experience it based off of our own lived experience going into it. So trying to incorporate more perspectives into that and honoring the stories that people are willing to share. And I know that there's said questions held to the end, but I guess this is just a reminder slide. If you have any questions, to please add them in the chat. You can find more of the work on my website, briannalhb.com, or on Instagram, briannalhb. I really appreciate you all being here. Thank you so much for listening. I'm really happy to be part of this group, and thank you for the invite. I think I'm at time though, right?
You're great. You're good. No, this is amazing. And I'm well familiar with your work and your process and your person, which is like just you as a person, you're inspiring and amazing just by yourself. So to see you share your process and your work and everything that's coming to be about this. I'm loving the questions that are emerging about this and your process and your work and how eerily relevant it is right now. It's especially poignant. It's especially important. Thank you for doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much. And yeah, I'll just say it is interesting because, you know, in the grief community, we talk a lot about how nobody wants to talk about this and trying to break down those barriers of discussing it. And now it's like, well, you can't really avoid it anymore. There's really not a way around it. So I'm really grateful to have already found a grief community where, you know, we can share a lot of the things that come up over everything that's happened this past year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's especially, you know, if we think about trauma as like too much too fast, you know, this is a collective worldwide trauma that we're experiencing, and it's only happened once in the world's history where everyone in the world is experiencing the whole same thing at the same time. So it's I love what you're doing. It's amazing. You're amazing. Thank you. So we will share questions for Brianna at the end, and feel free to share any more questions about her work, her process, her person, her artifacts. There's so much to work with that. So feel free to ask anything in the Q&A. I see some are coming through in the chat, and that's brilliant as well. So thank you so much, and we will come back.
See you in a bit.
So last but not least, we welcome Eirann to share, hey, to share process, and you have done some wildly amazing things. I only wish that I knew about you. I moved over the summer. I wish that I knew about you. I would have been there, and you're awesome, and I can't wait to hear you share more about what you're doing.
I can't wait to do more stuff with you, and thank you so much for joining us. And Brianna and Jenny, I know you're out there. I feel like we're friends already, because like just sitting and listening to you talk for 15-20 minutes has been not just inspiring, but also just so nice to hear intentional artists, even if it's not in my same space, and especially if it's not in my same space. So I can't wait to email you to collab. So thank you for being here, all of you, for sure. I can kind of take over from here if you don't mind, Mallory.
Absolutely. Yeah, please do.
Awesome.
Please do.
Cool. My presentation is going to be probably a little bit different, just because my art form is a little bit more different. It's a little bit, it's much more theatrical, stage wise, as it is visual arts. So I'm much more of a performing arts human, and you'll find that in my PowerPoint that I'm about to share as well. Your PowerPoints were so beautifully done. I'll just make sure that everyone can see it.
Oh, and Eirann, you can't see it in the chat. Both Jenny and Brianna are saying like, yes, collab.
Let's do it. Oh yeah, we're already into it. Cool. So again, my name is Eirann Betka-Pope. My pronouns are they, them. And I am an artist and a producer, a director, a writer, an activist, just an all-around person that tries to exist in Grand Rapids in the art scene. This intro page is me flexing with the mayor down there. I had to add that in. Those are my good friends in comedy there. My dog Cornelius and my wife pictured above that. My brothers and myself. My mom is a huge inspiration for all of us. All four of us are queer, and we just started our lives that way. And so every story I say, when I say queer, I don't just mean LGBTQ. I mean, it's just what they used to use the word queer as. It's a strange anomaly, the things that we try to do as a community. Down in the other corner is my wife and I enjoying a winter's night out. And then in the middle below is myself in New Orleans, my favorite city, second to Grand Rapids, of course. So just a quick intro about me. This is just how my brain works, so I hope you can take this journey with me. Here's a timeline. So really quick, I started my theater journey in high school and in college, and really enjoyed it. And then moved through AmeriCorps, did some community theater and teaching. But my journey, I think, began right around this area here when I joined an improv troupe that was just practicing to hang out. And when you hear improv troupe, I know you think about just a bunch of nerds on stage just pretending, and that's exactly what it is. Like, like that, we are meeting your expectations right there. But it was fun and it was something different, and I never thought that I could survive a desk job mentally, physically, emotionally. And awesome for those who do. I applaud you and we need you. My capacity wasn't that. So as soon as I joined this improv troupe, this performing arts group, I felt a little bit more freedom to book shows and experiment with different venues and different ways to touch the community. So just down the line, after that, I founded with this group, Comedy Outlet Mondays and the Grand Rapids Improv Festival. Comedy Outlet Mondays is a weekly variety show that has a news desk that also does some satire, comedy. The Improv Festival is a nationwide festival that brings all sorts of groups in to do improv. And so right around 2015, we were really starting to feel like this could be something that we can do for a living. Also around that time, we found that not a lot of women representation was prevalent in the comedy community, and it was still a few years back in than what we wanted it to be. So a few of us founded a group called Funny Girls that was specifically a women plus group that could express their comedy, whether it was stand-up, improv, sketch comedy, film, live stuff. It didn't matter. If you were into comedy, we were going to figure out how to make that happen. So this is like this year of self-discovery and that anything can happen. After that, I was asked to be the founder of a comedy project, which is a bar on the west side that teaches improv. If you're familiar with Chicago's Second City or IO, you guys in Wisconsin are right above that, so I'm sure you go and visit them all the time. So we have that here in Grand Rapids, and it opened just before COVID, a year before COVID. And then COVID happened, and here we are now at Betka-Pope Productions. And not to Quentin Tarantino it, but we're going to kind of backtrack it now that you know my whole life story. What I know that I was asked to focus on is, and I'm going to give you another timeline, but this is my whole 9-month, 12-month journey. And the colored lines above the black line is my mental health. And I just want to be super transparent about it because I think that's an important part of art. So you'll see that in the very beginning, I started to make jokes about COVID. In this news desk, I found out that there was a pandemic, but we make jokes about serious issues. And not to say that Brianna makes jokes about serious issues, but you understand the storytelling and the nuance of if something is so heavy, you want to try to balance it. And then the next week my theater shut down. That was like jokes on me. And so you'll see that the mental health starts to kind of fade a little bit. And at the end of September, I found that I just wasn't happy not doing anything, and that I felt like independently, or my spouse and I, we could do something more than nothing. And I'll get into that in a little bit, but with that and with representation and a lot of the intention that Jenny and Brianna both talked about, I just felt like it was right to leave that space at that time, which is a hard place to leave in the middle of COVID. The little gray blip there is my feeling nothing. And that is how it was. And there was an inspiration break at the end of, like at the beginning of October. And from then I started to be able to think about building a new business and started to produce again. So again, I just want to give you a little context of where I'm at and where we're starting again. So with that being said, I found that adapting as an artist myself meant that I had to identify my challenge. I had to connect with a solution. That didn't mean I had to make it on my own. I had to connect with one. I think that's important to talk about. And then create something new, something different. And so I set out to identify my challenges. I found out my challenges, and I think like a lot of artists might have shared this with me. You just don't feel inspired to produce, or you just don't feel inspired at all. And that might be whether you're a visual artist or a performing artist or an accountant, or like you just don't feel inspired because things are wonky. My second challenge was that theaters are shut down, and that's like a physical challenge. Like that's something that I can't control, but it is what it is. And then I think the third challenge for me was that people are afraid, and rightfully so. I'm also people. I was also afraid. We still are. It's still unknown. But if you don't address these things, and as an artist, I feel like you won't be able to move beyond them or let them block you until you bust through them, however your process works. So if you don't mind, I'm going to walk you through my challenges, how I moved with them, and I'll give you some examples. I promise. I'll give you the receipts. So my first challenge is that I don't feel inspired or I don't feel productive. So my two options are connecting a solution, and then also creating something new. So my solution was knowing that the artist community also is feeling that way, hooking up with a bunch of other artists who feel the same. They want to perform. I know they exist. And then trying to inspire. I was a super broke artist with no money, and I was out picking up to-go order, and I felt bad because I could only tip 20%, and like I never just tip 20%, and neither should you. But I felt really bad, so I talked to my wife, and I was like, let's talk to the community and see if we can start raising tip money. So we put out where we're going to go, and we'll go for a modest dinner, and then the community will meet us and match us with money for tips. And because we were feeling uninspired because we were poor, and we reached out to our community for help, we were able to tip. So Sun Lee up here, the owner of Caffeine Cafe, she got $1,000 cash. And then down here is GR Noir, which is Grand Rapids' first and only Black-owned jazz and wine club. It is like the most badass place. We were able to tip them $1,000 as well. Literally, we weren't able to. The community was able to. So we had artists and service workers and people of all types just putting money in to support somebody else. And that in itself inspired me to think, okay, we're still a community. We still need to feel things, and we still need to keep moving on. So it lit a fire under my ass to start some actual production things. So once I was inspired, once we connected a solution, we connected with other artists who wanted to support both financially and creatively. And then we moved into creating something new. So not just settling with what we did. Now we're like, let's do something on top of that. So we did a trivia night in our backyard. Everyone had their own plot, and it was very mask required, very socially distanced. I did a traveling game show, again, very socially distanced, and that was through Avenue for the Arts, which connected us here tonight. I did a Ghost in the Graveyard, which is a full Halloween production with solo acts, so they didn't have to rehearse together. And the audience, instead of buying seats, they bought graveyard plots, 4x4 plots in my backyard. So finding a way to put on a production, but then add a little bit of jazz to it. And in that, I also started to discover a little bit of new things about Grand Rapids. And we started Grand Rapids Crime Tours, which takes individuals around to different locations in Grand Rapids, telling true crime. So we got that challenge out of the way, not feeling inspired or productive. I'm almost too productive and inspired and connected now. And I'm feeling like a lot of people are feeling hope. So that's awesome. The next challenge, theaters are shut down. Again, nothing we can do about that. For connecting a solution, I wanted to see if other community establishments, what were open and what the possibilities were. And we're also in Grand Rapids, which is in Michigan, which is like Wisconsin, a 4-season state. And if you are going to survive the winter, everybody has coats. You can take things outside. It's not like we're ill prepared for the cold. We know what we're expecting, so we can go outside and we can enjoy it. So I was trying to think about some new alternative options to being in theaters. Can we take theaters outside in a way where we can still tell stories and be heard? So we created these walking tours and backyard shows and special events. And Grand Rapids opened up a downtown refreshment area. So you can take an open container in these blocks of Grand Rapids. And as long as it's from an establishment that has a license for these open containers, it's totally legal to walk around and drink an adult beverage around Grand Rapids. And so as soon as we heard that, we decided to innovate that Grand Rapids Crime Tours and bring some storytelling and some outdoor drinking and moving around to Grand Rapids. So again, theater shut down, let's take theater outside. The third challenge was that people are afraid, and like very rightfully so. And I really embrace what Jenny was saying earlier about, I think she said something about, we want to create a space where you're not uncomfortable with wine on your teeth. And like, I love that saying of, you can have wine on your teeth at our tours, but we're also going to make sure that you are staying safe. So it's comfortable. It's cool to come out dressed however you want to come out. It's super casual, but we're also going to make sure that we know what we're talking about when it comes to protective gear, and we're addressing our safety in a transparent way. And combining fun and being very truthful, I think is a precipice of this new company that we're forming and this new world that we're forming as well. You can't hide the safety precautions you're taking. You can't sneak around it. You have to embrace it. And you can write your name on your mask at our tours, or put a mustache on there, or you embrace the change. So those 3 challenges, trying to hit them head on. The result has been some really fun Grand Rapids crime tours that have ensued. So these pictures are of some of our employees and some of our tours. Ginger Ambrosia is a local drag queen who takes a huge chunk of our tours and sells them out. And she walks these tours in those heels. If you look at each of those pictures of her. She walks 2 miles in those heels telling true crime stories, and I couldn't even handle it. The picture down here with all of us in the daylight, those are some of our current tour guides right now. Ginger, myself, Mike Logan, who's a stand-up comedian in Grand Rapids, and then Simone, who does improv and acting in Grand Rapids as well. So we wanted to make sure that we were intentionally hiring artists who were out of work that could tell stories in a different and fun way, and not to diminish any of the crimes, and not to, we always want to make sure that we are honoring the victims and the victims' families. We're not trying to sensationalize the crimes. We're trying to tell the history of Grand Rapids so that you hear a different side of it. We're not talking about crimes that are against people. We're mostly talking about crimes against humanity, not the fun game. We're talking about some really interesting stories in there. And then that's Grand Rapids Crime Tours. And then, oh, my time's almost good. Cool. Can you hear the music? I don't know if you can hear the music, but this is just a highlight of our grand race. These are the teams of the grand race. So just a quick highlight of the things that we did on Grand Race. We sent people around downtown Grand Rapids masked up in their own household teams. They checked QR codes and they got to do different activities until, and they solved clues to get to the next space, much like the Amazing Race meets a scavenger hunt. So finding ways to get outside and get people entertained in general. So next, Betka-Pope Productions, we're going to do another grand race. We're doing a full-blown drag show, movie themed at Studio Park, which is our downtown cinema. They have a big outdoor space, which we're going to take up. My wife and I are bound to do Little Shop of Horrors at a small plant shop. So again, taking theater into places that it might not have, you might not have thought that's where theater belonged, but it absolutely is where theater should be. And Grand Rapids Crime Tours, we're looking forward to more special events, working with the public library for programming through kids and adults. We're also going to be doing some more intentional hiring as well. And down the road, just opening up some pop-up theater dinner spaces and things. That's where I'm hoping to head with everything. And again, way different stories than a few of the other presenters, but just so appreciative to be able to think outside the box and be able to continue to do art and bring other people into that, even in the time where it seems most difficult to do.
Yes, and I know like our breadth of panelists is like reflected tonight.
Yeah.
And we did that. I just knowing like how, I think it just speaks to like how different this is for all of us, and how important it is to have the arts in this process. I mean, like theater, visual arts, like how important Netflix is to everyone right now. Like the arts are so important right now, and we need it more than anything. So I'm so glad that you're here, and like your creativity is like, again, I wish I was here. I wish I knew. This is amazing.
You're here.
You're
We're all
amazing.
here now. And even if we're not here, like we've found a way to, we've found this, and I think you were talking on that really well, Mallory. We found a way that it's necessary to continue to connect outside of just face to face, and find ways that everybody can be in it together.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. And that's just, I love, you know, like you shared like just the embracing change. That's what it is. And I love that you were so like candid and honest and vulnerable about, you know, like your timelines were amazing. Like,
It's just how my brain works. I hope people were like, what the hell?
no, I love it. And I'm like, I had that myself as an artist. I was like, what? Like, because we were all so young and naive and like, this will last 2 weeks. It'll be fine. It was not. So amazing. So glad you're here. So glad you're sharing. With that, we can invite Brianna and Jenny back into the group and we can just share in some questions. And I would invite all of the amazing attendees who are here to, as we're kind of moving through this, you know, sharing questions about their work, their process, their innovation, their amazing things that they're doing, just questions about them as people, anything and everything. And I have a few questions to start. So one of the things someone asked that I thought was so incredibly important and like something that you can all relate to is how you as an artist, like not super COVID related, but just like generally life related, like how do you manage so many things? You know, I think like a lot of you are doing both like artist work, but also like arts administration work. And nonprofit work or community work. And, you know, it's like so many different experiences. So someone asked, like, how do you personally manage your time? Or like, how do you figure out what happens when? So anyone can hop in for this.
I can start. I see Brianna nodding her head though.
I thought you could all relate to this one. I was like, I could relate to this one.
I don't think, I think you learn as you go. Like, I've never been trained as an arts administrator. I worked as a photographer and in archives and libraries and lots of other things before I started communication. I think I'm finally getting to a place after 3 years where I understand, like, what does the workflow need to be for this specific thing? How can I have better boundaries so that I'm not working on the weekends and I can spend time with my family? I think that for me, having kind of a difficult pregnancy and then, you know, still trying to make my business work and make art, and then having a very young child and then having COVID, the past 3 years have been really challenging for me. But what that has done, like, I'm sort of reflecting on what Brianna was saying about talking about grief, and like really experiencing the grief, like being with it. And then what Eirann was saying about like being like seeing the challenges and just like recognizing that they're there and knowing you're going to live through them. During the past 3 years, I did not feel like I was like, I can't do this sometimes. But now, you know, there is sort of some light at the end of the tunnel in terms of pandemic life. And my business is changing. My personal art practice is moving forward. My child can walk around for 3 minutes by herself. But I think that it's not that I couldn't go through those things or that I needed to learn. I had to experience it. And only by going through that could I create better boundaries, start to learn to manage my time better, and get to a place where I could see sort of the separations between things. I'm not there at all, but I'm going to get there, hopefully.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I totally agree with all that, you know, finding that balance and how does that come together in a way that makes you feel like you're thriving. And for me, it's also very much in my studio process, I work under the premise that everything that we work on in our lives is connected to other things in our lives. And so a lot of the work that I do outside of the studio very much feeds the things that I do in the studio. and vice versa. Like a problem that I'm working on in my physical studio practice can help me problem solve for something in like a classroom setting or something in a nonprofit setting or what have you. So for me, it's like, I need them all because they all speak to each other, and I never quite know like what they're gonna say. But once I just allow, that process to intuitively start working together, then I can find new answers that maybe I wouldn't have come to otherwise if I was just focused on this one thing. So that's what I like though, but not everybody works the same, but that's kind of how I function.
Mm-hmm.
I can relate to that for sure, Brianna. If it's my project, I'm like, I'll get it done. Or more realistically, if it's my project, I put a date in my calendar and then I make it public, and I'm like, I'm gonna do this show on this day, and I get a graphic and I put it out there because now I'm accountable if I have to be. But I've learned to ask other people to hold me accountable, and if they're in the capacity to be asked that, I find I work well with people that are quote unquote type A, which I am absolutely not. But if you're a type A personality and you're capable of being asked to hold me to a timeline and give me a date, and then we're squeezed, like we're fine. Like I will get that date done. But I found that I have to tell them my vulnerability of not holding time well. Because if I just assume that they think that I know that and nobody sets a timeline, nothing gets done. And that's on me and I get that. So knowing that, I truly have to ask for a timeline, or I have to set it publicly. And like Brianna said, that's not how everyone works. That's how my messy brain works. But only if they have a capacity to hold me to that. Because if I'm working with another messy person too, then we'll get it done. It'll just be different and later and whatever.
And it's good to know that about yourself, like what can I do? What is my capacity? How can we handle things? And you explore. So yes. We have a few questions for each of you as we kind of navigate through this. So I can kind of sift through these, but I think this speaks to a number of you actually. First I was writing this for Jenny, but then I realized like, my goodness, you all have this in common and it's amazing. So kind of speaking to the act of care, I think all of you respond to an act of care or caregiving in different capacities, each with your own medium, but each with your own, audience. And I love how we didn't plan for the similarity, but my golly, it is like incredibly wonderful that happened. So if you could all kind of speak to like your personal art or public art practice and its relationship to care. Jenny, I initially wrote this down for you because you said the phrase like holding things on your lap. And that's such like a, like a female identifying, like historical phrase, or understanding of like things. But really this question is for all of you, like the things that we hold in our laps, the caregiving component and aspect of your work. And you guys can kind of speak to that a little bit.
I'll go first again. I think that care is such a great word to just think about. And I get excited to think about it because I think that it is the thing we need most in our communities and in our homes. One thing that I've thought about a lot in the past year is like, what is my role in community? And I've had to really evaluate that, whether, because of the sort of that balance we were talking about, how do I balance being a mom and running this business where like, I was the mom of the business, you know, I'm making sure all these little projects are getting done, and slowly that changes. But how is it, sorry, in addition to mom of child, mom of business, what is my role in society, whether it has to do with whether I can sew masks for someone, or, which I figured out I was not good at, or can I go be a part of protests, movements? What am I physically, emotionally, and mentally capable of? And what I was like, just like going through that over the past year has been really, really helpful to me. And like having to identify what is the thing that I do that is care, not just like, what's my personal art practice? Like, forget it. Like, it's not about what's my personal art practice. It's like, what is my role in society, and how do I make that happen in every avenue of my life? And so thinking about the way that I treat my child and the way that I treat people that come into the business that I co-run, like, those are equally important to me, because what I'm building with my other collective member colleagues is for my child, and how I treat her reflects how I want everyone else in my community to be treated. And I have to look at those things equally. So like that kind of care it has to go everywhere for me.
I'll jump in to switch things up, Brianna. Not like, because people don't think it's planned or anything. Yes, I appreciate hearing both Jenny and Brianna's stories, because they just are wrapped in such care. And I was trying to think, like, do I care? And like, what capacity is that? But the caring for someone can be so involved, and giving a care can be just the outskirts of that. It's just before you don't care is care. You know what I mean? You care until you don't care. And I never want to don't care. And I really want to care, but cool talking. But I never want to like get too involved in the care that I don't forget that there is joy and comedy and freedom. But I also don't want to get too stuck in the joy and comedy and freedom to not realize that there is really intense things happening that we do need to care about. So how can we bring activism in with silly isms? How can we bring comedy and deep thinking in? So for my care, and I can't wait to hear about Brianna's care, because it's end of life care is so intentional. But I would want to say mine is right on that skirt of like care and don't care, where at least we're calling people in and they're feeling heard or seen or wanted. And then we can shuffle them to Jenny and Brianna, and they'll really care. Do you know what I mean? There's a difference between cared for and being cared of, or whatever.
Yeah, and I think about like, and I would love to hear more about like the graveyard. I'm gonna mix up the name, but the graveyard.
Ghosts in the graveyard.
Thank you. I was like, oh no, I'm gonna flip up the words. But that requires a great deal of care. I mean, any sort of public event or public spacing or COVID work in the public involves a great deal of care. I mean, just considering like all the considerations, but also considering their emotional safety, their public safety, their, physical safety.
Yeah, that's super fair. And the care of the fact that we know that these artists they don't have a stage anywhere. Right. And you can't do stand up on Zoom. Like you can't. You need a live audience, and a lot of theater, we're just struggling because Zoom theater is just different. It just hits different, as the youth say. But when a lot of the comedians or the musicians said, like, I could be up there and I felt normal for the first time in 9 months. You're right. That was something that we intentionally thought of.
Yeah.
I care.
And I love that. Like, I mean, as like the care, like you're considering the care of the performance actors and how you as the organizer are caring for them and making this happen. And I love that.
Yeah, and can pay them not totally what they're worth, but can pay them.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I love that. We have some amazing other questions. Let's see where to start. So I guess for Jenny, one of the questions that we had was, I think you shared like how artists or just people can reach you, and or one of the questions was, how can artists participate like from anywhere? Like for example, hypothetically speaking, Grand Rapids artists invited to participate?
I mean, I'm always open to artists who might want to sell in our shop, and I know that Sarah, our shop manager, is as well. And actually, we just got is it Transfigure Print Co? Or that's the one in Grand Rapids, right? Am I remembering that correctly? Hold on, let me look it up.
We have Issue Press, yeah.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Zachary. So they're actually going to start selling in our shop. Someone mentioned communication as a space that's good to sell like zines and prints and posters, and they reached out to us. And so, hi Sarah, thanks for confirming. So yeah, generally we are like local, but that doesn't mean we can't sort of branch out a little bit. Like I think that, once again, talking about like strengthening bonds, strengthening communities, like there's not a whole lot of DIY arts and music spaces that survive past a year. And so if there are artists in other cities that want to connect on this stuff, like it only helps us to be connected. And so that's one way that we can connect, is artists being in our shop. We also are interested in publishing people. So if you can go and look at our website, which I can put in the chat in a minute, if you didn't see it already, and you can try to submit writing or visuals, arts, zines, things like that. If you want to talk about other ideas, like just email me, and I'm into it, because I do think that, and I do think there are other ways, like exhibitions, events, things like that we're really interested in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's amazing. I know. I'll just kind of getting to know Grand Rapids, I'm sure people would love to be involved. That's incredible. Yeah. So the next kind of thought or question was for Brianna. Just considering, you mentioned the word artifacts, and like just seeing your pieces that you used as artifacts on that, the example in your residency still, and kind of exploring now as well. These are artifacts of caregiving and or like the terminally ill experience and caregiving through that. And I was just wondering if you could kind of speak to how that's echoed now, like how these artifacts, like as like holy objects, or artifacts to be studied of the times of caregiving, or the times of COVID, or the times of that unfortunate overlap. Like how has that experience been for you as that's kind of emerged like forward?
I mean, yeah, there's been a really interesting overlap, because I went into this with the experience that caregiving is extremely isolating. And a lot of that is because, especially when you're caregiving for somebody who's terminally ill, people are really uncomfortable with the conversation of knowing that somebody's dying, or you're so overwhelmed with all the tasks at hand, you're so exhausted that you just don't even have energy to reach out to people. And so I kind of went into it with that perspective of, okay, if you're really isolated, if you don't have a lot of options, if you don't financially have the resources to bring in extra support to give yourself that breathing room, then what are things that you can immediately do to help yourself? And for me, retroactively, that was reframing these tools. I think back and I don't think anybody thinks the idea of a mouth swab is really glamorous, but without that, how else would I, wet my mother's mouth or clean something up for her? Like, what would I use instead? It would be something really awkward. It would not be hygienic. It would be, much more complicated. And so even though, again, it's this disposable plastic, it's really helping me. And how can I honor that moment? And then again, how can that be reflected on me? Like, I'm not just this frazzled, burnt out, emotional wreck. I'm also carrying out this important task. And so knowing that the isolation now is even more compounded because not only because people can't spend time with their friends or in public, but also because there's this extra pressure to keep that person safe. You don't want to you don't want complications to arise. You don't want to speed up the process. So there's an extra pressure to not go anywhere or see anyone because you could put them at risk. Or even just somebody that you're caregiving for who maybe isn't terminal, but is in a very delicate state and could become terminal if exposed to something. So that isolation is just heightened beyond belief. And so leaning into this even more, that we need even more of those immediate mental tools to help ourselves. So how can I reformat the care tools to be more accessible, similarly to, this artist grief deck that I'm so grateful to be a part of, and how can I, through the process of making those, find even more solutions to just send out into the world. And, I found a lot of people in the Instagram grief and caregiving community, and how can we connect with each other about what those moments are that can help us? Because there's really just not a lot of resources out there. Most of the time, family caregivers are just kind of left to fill in these gaps without any information about what that looks like. So it's very much a learning process, but I've been trying to approach it from the idea of what do I already know about this experience and how can I lean into that even more for those that are still in this hyper isolated version of it,
Yeah. Yeah, I think your experience with the work, and we are all in elements of caregiving right now, whether we're caregiving for ourselves or caregiving for other people, or mindfully and wonderfully caregiving for people that we can't necessarily reach right now, or reach them in the ways that we can. And I think it's just, again, incredibly poignant, incredibly important, and beautiful. So thank you again for your work. I think that's a fantastic segue and kind of thought about for Eirann. I think it's just knowing Jenny and Brianna more, and knowing my own practice and knowing so many different artists, it is so extremely common and human and normal to have that stutter effect of COVID happened and then we didn't breathe. And how did I love that you shared those timelines. That was so incredibly awesome and human and vulnerable and amazing. And I love that you shared your creative shock. How did you can you share a little bit more about how you navigated that? How did you, because things were just getting worse. How did you navigate that?
it truly, it just got worse. And that's a good way to put it. Our first, the first Monday of performances, because we were performing 4 nights a week and rehearsing 2 nights a week. And that was just full time. That's what we were doing. And plus opening up the bar and having our new liquor license and just full steam ahead. And literally as soon as the first pistol started running, it just shut down. You know what I mean? And I don't even know motors, and that's what happened. And it crushed a community, because you can't just do theater at your house until you figure out how to do it together. And we couldn't even figure out how to do it on Zoom. And they're just didn't seem like a way.
Mhm.
And so it sucks to suck, but it sucks when everybody in your community is also in that space and there's nobody being like, well, here's an option. Because nobody had, same with restaurants, same, like, I
Yeah.
could go on. Literally anybody's industry was
Mhm.
changed and forever changed. And I think it was just a few of us being so cabin fevery and being so like, I was reflecting with my wife about what we were going to talk about, what I was going to talk about today, and how I did get out of that. And I was like, I didn't. We started the community tip because we were poor and we asked other people to help us with that. We started Ghost in the Graveyard because one of my dearest friends came to me and they were like, my partner's not doing so well. They need a project. Can you help them with a project? And I was like, let's put on a show. Like, I don't want to, but your partner needs to. So let's do that.
Yeah.
GR Crime Tours was the same, just like my drag queen friend was like, I can't do shit. Sorry if I can say that. Like, I can't do anything right now. And I was like, yes, you can. We'll find it. And it was the tenacity of my friends and seeing their need that was the only thing that scraped me off of my like burnt cheese bottom of the pan self that I was. Turns out burnt cheese is really good. I recommend it to anybody. A good crispy fried cheese. But in the time when you're a cheese burning, it doesn't feel, you know what I mean? Like you just feel like burnt stinky cheese. You feel like there's no options, but somebody tells you you're delicious. And it's just because you could be so vulnerable. That's how you get out. That's how I got out.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, we just
Sorry about
have,
all my metaphors. I'm out of control.
no, I love it. I am like, I'm an English major. I am here for it. I am here for it.
Thanks, Zachary, also for the
That's amazing. I love it so much. So I think, well, we have about 5 minutes here, so we'll maybe do a quick like roundtable closing remark, and then I see a few last questions are emerging, and that's amazing, and I love it. We could respond to those individually as well. So perhaps can you, in 30 seconds, we'll just say that, roundtable, can you sum up all the things when the world emerges again and we are free and things are good? Can you sum up some of the things that you are absolutely most excited to do? And you guys can go in whatever order you want.
I'll jump in. Oh,
Oh, go ahead.
Brianna, I'm so sorry. 30 seconds. Most looking forward to is the laughter of a genuine audience.
That was like 3 seconds. You can totally, that's amazing. Okay, like it's done. Okay, that's amazing.
I mean, that's a good answer. Yeah.
That is, that's
mean,
like the whole answer.
Right. Mine's pretty short too, and it's not really anything to do with what I've said so far, but I'm just really looking forward to like hugging people again. Like when you meet someone out in public or an event and you can just give them a hug, like it's so good to see you. Like I'm so over the elbow bump. I need to hug somebody. Like,
yeah,
just especially because we haven't seen each other in so long.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
I don't know how long it's going to be till we get to that point, but yeah, I miss like the casual intimacy and the intimacy of friendships. You know, like even if you live with other people, like I have my husband and my child, like that's like we drive each other crazy half the time right now. but I think that being able to be with people that you love, that you can't touch right now, like that's what I want. I want a slumber party with my 2 best friends. I want a slumber party with my 20 best friends. That's what I want.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I love it. Completely agree with everything that you're saying. I've only like elbow bumped once, but I was like, I only did it once because I was like, I never want to do this again, ever. I feel this. I'm with you all. This is amazing, and what an incredible panel to have in this week in particular, that is like the really, for most of us, like the 1-year anniversary of knowing that this was happening, and a lot of people's lives kind of coming into this space, and hearing all of these stories echoed over social media of like, this is what I knew and this is what I knew. Just to share this space with you guys and all the attendees, it's such an incredible gift and honor. So we, in like our closing, we at Avenue for the Arts and ArtPrize and Lions and Rabbits, we're so thankful that everyone could join us tonight. We are so thankful for Eirann and Jenny and Brianna, and for Katie and for Zachary for their amazing work and amazing time sharing and giving and creating what this all is. And I think that we all really need this right now. So with that said, we very much welcome any, I'm seeing the chats come in. We're very much welcoming all of the next 2 panels. The next one is next Thursday, March 18th, where we are talking about reinvigorating local journalism, local arts journalism, and what that means and how we can bring that forward. And we will be talking with Christina Knapziger of 60 Inches from Center, a Chicago-based artist and writer and more. We're super, super excited for the last Thursday in March 25th, for our State of the Art in Grand Rapids, where we are talking with Stephanie Rosales of Granville Avenue Arts and Humanities, Site Lab, Michelle Bozak of UICA, Hannah Berry of Lions and Rabbits, and more. We are so honored and excited to be here with all of you, and honored that you joined us tonight when there was so much going on, when it was so nice and warm. It's 50 degrees, 60 degrees, depending on where you are, and such an incredible blessing. So you all are wonderful, and now we invite you to join in kind of a happy hour, social hour. We will share the link below in the chat. It's High Fidelity, which is not just a movie and book, but a super cool like social website event experience where, much like The Sims, you become like a sim character. You need headphones. You can follow the link in the chat, but you can kind of like walk up to people, and as you get closer to them, your audio for them gets louder. It's super cool. As you if you walk away, the audio gets quieter. So it's really just kind of a fun interaction tool, and it's so perfectly suitable for the theme that we are exploring tonight, which is innovating in the time of COVID. So again, I invite all of you to explore that. All you need is headphones. You can follow the link below. And thank you again, everyone, for being with us and sharing this space tonight. So
Thank you, Mallory and Katie and Brianna and Eirann and Zachary.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you all so much. This was wonderful to be a part of.
Grace says, thanks, y'all. All right. We will see you guys later. Be sure to hop on the chat before you bounce if you want to join.